Almost everyone loves a good scare, but the really scary things in life are serious business. Retirement can certainly be a scary time, especially if you're not sure that you're prepared to meet its many challenges. Can you answer the scariest questions about retirement? It's that time again, time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies and new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional style investing to your portfolio. The Halloween season is all about make-believe fears and fun. However, millions of Americans live in real fear when it comes to thinking about retirement. Studies show that an estimated 74% of Americans are behind on their retirement planning, and that many couples ages 56 to 61 have less than $50,000 in savings. Now, regardless of where you stand on your own retirement plan, most people agree that one of the best ways to deal with many fears is to face them head-on. I know from experience that's true when it comes to fears about retirement planning. With that in mind, today we're going to address 4 scary retirement questions on this special Halloween edition of the Income Generation. Joining me will be mortgage and investing expert Chris Hogan, also the author of Everyday Millionaires, along with James Locke, co-founder of Pool Locke Associates in Delaware. But first, let's dive right into what is possibly the biggest and scariest question about retirement for many people, and that is, can I retire? Earlier this year, we did a show all about the changing face of retirement and the fact that many baby boomers are redefining just what it means to be retired. They're buying RVs and traveling the country. Many are supplementing their income by taking temporary seasonal jobs all along the way, collectively forming a new arm of the workforce called work campers. Others are working and living out their retirements on cruise ships, while many are starting new businesses or pursuing careers in less lucrative, but more meaningful places on a personal level. The point is this: many boomers are choosing to remain active and to continue working in their retirement years. Some are motivated by sheer desire, some by economics, and for some, it's a combination. Now, in some cases, it's also a convenient way to avoid confronting the scariest retirement question of all, and that is, can I retire? Now, if you just assume that you can't retire, or you simply choose not to without crunching the numbers, you never get the pleasure of knowing that work is a choice. And moreover, if you do have to work to pay the bills, then wouldn't you want to know that? But you know, there's another flip side almost to avoiding this fear, which is that your later years can end up being ruled by another fear, and that's running out of income. Now, you may tell yourself you want to keep working, but deep down, you know the main driver for doing so is the fear of falling into financial hardship in your 80s or your 90s, which is genuinely a scary prospect. If you really know you want to keep working or to start a second career, well, that's great. But you should still take the time to examine the question, can I afford to retire if I wanted to? The reason it seems so scary to many people is that they approach it with the wrong mindset. They've been taught that the answer all boils down to the size of their nest egg. How much have you managed to save during your working years, and is it enough to last? That is, once you've begun taking withdrawals to meet your income needs. Well, as I point out in my new book, The Retirement Income Story, that's exactly the wrong way to think about financing your retirement. While it's true that the more you can manage to save for retirement, the better, there isn't one magic lump sum that everyone needs to achieve. The amount will differ for everyone depending upon a variety of factors, including your specific retirement goals. That's why an important first step toward answering this question, can I retire, is to identify exactly what those goals are. Do you want to downsize for simplicity purposes? Or do you want to travel? Do you want to complicate your life a little bit perhaps and buy a boat? Do you want to move abroad? Maybe you genuinely do want to keep working or start a new business. And if you do, again, that's great. But don't fall into the trap of assuming you have to just do it because you haven't managed to save $1 million or so, or whatever that amount might be, that the so-called professionals say you need in order to retire. Here's the reality. Regardless of the size of your nest egg, you still risk running out of money if you don't have your assets for retirement allocated properly. In other words, if they're allocated in such a way that you are, in fact, spending down your savings and crossing your fingers and toes, hoping to regenerate it through growth or capital appreciation, then you're in danger of depleting your savings. And this is whether you start with $500,000 or $1.5 million. The bottom line is that answering the scary question, can I retire, is about much more than adding up your total assets. People who believe it's just that simple are often the ones who avoid dealing with the question. Why? Because they automatically assume I don't have enough. However, there's much more to it than that. The question depends on your individual goals, your personal situation, and most importantly, identifying the right financial strategy for retirement. Now, if you're a regular viewer, you know I believe that means a strategy designed to protect your principal and to generate reliable income for up to 30 years of retirement, and to give you the opportunity to continue growing your nest egg organically through strategic reinvestment. We'll tackle another scary retirement question coming up in just a bit.
Investing for income? The idea has grown in popularity over the last several years due to today's volatile stock market. But if you're at or near retirement age, it's no longer just how much you've saved. It's about maximizing and protecting your life savings while minimizing your risk from market ups and downs. David J. Scranton's new book, The Retirement Income Story, is here to help baby boomers face the challenges of investing in this age of economic uncertainty. Visit theretirementincomestory.com to learn more.
Now it's time to bring in our first guest, mortgage and investing expert Chris Hogan. He's also the national #1 best-selling author of the book, Everyday Millionaires. Chris, thanks so much for being back on the show.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back with you.
So it's interesting, Everyday Millionaires, you know, unfortunately, for some today, being a millionaire in and of itself isn't quite enough to retire. So we were talking earlier on the show that a lot of people just bury their heads in the sand and they just assume they're going to have to work forever. And many could be pleasantly surprised if they knew what they were doing, if they knew how to invest for income, or knew that there were experts out there that can do that for them. They might be pleasantly surprised to find that maybe they can retire. So what do you tell people that are approaching retirement that maybe have that self-doubt? They seem to have some assets, but they're thinking, oh, I'm just going to have to work forever.
Well, I think, David, the first thing you have to do is really start to understand, what does retirement look like for you? You know, I've encouraged people to really define their dream and really understand, are you wanting to travel? How often? Are you wanting to spend time with family? Start a dream business? Begin to really see it in high definition and understand what it is and what it's going to entail. But I think it's less about understanding a hard set number and really understanding your lifestyle, your assets, and then what are you doing right now to put yourself in a position to be able to live those dreams and not just think about them.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We've done shows over the last year where some people want to downsize their house and get into mini homes, and they're just as happy that way. There's some people who've decided to take jobs on cruise ships and retire and make their vocation, their avocation, kind of sort of one and the same. So there are ways to do it on the cheap if you want, if you're willing, if you're good with that. And if not, well then you want to know that going in by knowing your goals, correct?
No, you're right. And that's what that boils down to. We've got to take the onus on ourselves. We can't sit back and you can't really have a victim mentality where you're looking to blame anyone. It's a matter of taking advantage of the time you have right now. What are you doing for yourself? For example, I was talking to a gentleman that his family spends around $3,500 eating out every month. $3,500. They're a family of 7. So I told him, I said, based on what you're doing right now, you're eating your financial future, right? You're not taking steps. So what do? You get realistic, you start to cut that back. And maybe you cut that in half or get it down to $1,000, and then let's start to invest that money. So we've got to be responsible and intentional for our dreams, for our future.
How about people, I'm sure you come across people that are preparing for retirement, they're on that final approach into retirement, but yet when you ask them what retirement means to them, what retirement's going to look like, they really don't know. In the minute or so we have left in this segment, tell our income generation members why that's actually kind of scary.
Well, it is very scary because then you don't know what life looks like. So I encourage people, listen, don't just retire to retire. You retire to move towards something else. whether it's more of your dreams and your hopes and things that you want to do. So I encourage people that are 3 or 4 years out from retirement, start to lay out a schedule. What are your first 30 and 60 days going to look like? You need to be intentional with being social. You need to be intentional with working out and doing things for yourself, but also finding some ways to give back. And so I think being intentional in that way helps us to ease that move into retirement.
Yeah, you've heard, I'm sure, people who retire and they're depressed. It was nothing like they assumed it would be. Maybe they sit around, maybe the television now, instead of being on 2 hours a day, it's on 8 hours a day, and their health starts to deteriorate, and they start to alienate themselves from other people. And that's no way to go into retirement. When you're in your later years and maybe your health deteriorates, you need people, you need your friends, you need your social network. You don't need to be alienated really because you don't have a plan.
Really is.
Yeah. So good. So Chris, we need to take a quick commercial break. Stay with us, please. And you stay with us too. We have a lot more here in terms of words of wisdom from our good friend Chris Hogan coming up in just a bit right here on the Income Generation. We'll be right back.
David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, The Retirement Income Story, will revolutionize the way baby boomers and their advisors plan and save for retirement. The Retirement Income Story, the story behind the launch of the Retirement Income Store, is about to shatter many of the myths Wall Street bankers have promoted and protected for decades. David outlines what he believes to be a much better method for planning and saving for retirement, one that doesn't involve taking on more stock market risk. In fact, most will be able to reduce and or possibly even eliminate stock market risk while creating renewable streams of income they can count on well into their retirement years. The simple truth is that if you were born in 1968 or sooner, you can't afford to ride out another catastrophic stock market drop like the ones in 2000 and 2007. Read The Retirement Income Story and revolutionize the way you plan and save for retirement.
Financial experts have predicted that the next major recession could happen as early as this year. What would you do if it took half of your retirement savings with it? I'm David Scranton, founder of Sound Income Strategies. And there is a safer way, investing for income. By focusing primarily on non-stock market income-generating investments, you could significantly reduce the impacts of the next major recession. Visit the Retirement Income Store at soundincomestrategies.com to connect with an income specialist who can help you get started to an income-based retirement plan. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow The Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
Sometimes even things that are intended to be comforting can be scary. A possessed doll is one example, Social Security is another. In fact, will I get the most out of my Social Security benefits is another one of the scariest questions that people face when approaching retirement. Now, admittedly, for a small number of people, Social Security isn't a big deal. However, for the majority of Americans, Social Security isn't just a nice-to-have thing. It's an essential part of their financial future and one of the biggest items on their balance sheet. That's why questions and uncertainties about Social Security can be so frightening. One of the scariest questions, of course, has to do with the long-term viability of the system itself. The need to fix the system has been a hot political button for years now, since demographic changes in the U.S. workforce will inevitably begin draining the Social Security Trust Fund. That's estimated to start happening in less than 20 years if no changes are made. Now, as most people know, Social Security was initially designed as a pay-and-go system. Payroll taxes from current workers could go into the trust fund and are immediately paid out to current retirees. But since baby boomers have been in their peak earning years, the trust fund has actually taken in more than it needs to pay out for current benefits. It's operating at a surplus, and that's good. However, as baby boomers begin to retire more and more, these trust fund assets will gradually be drawn down. More people will be collecting from the system than are paying into it, the exact opposite of the current situation. The good news is that there are enough reserves in the system to pay 100% of the proposed benefits through 2034. After that, its income will only be enough to cover approximately 80% of total benefits. So, although the system is not in immediate danger, the sooner it can be reformed to meet shifting demographic realities, the better. Now, there's currently a reform bill on the table called the Social Security 2100 Act, which proposes changes designed to extend Social Security solvency well into the next century. It has widespread support in Congress, but probably faces a tough battle in the Senate, so let's stay tuned, let's see what happens. Of course, another scary notion about Social Security is the fact that even at 100% payouts, Social Security alone isn't enough for most people to meet their retirement goals, or to even be at all comfortable in retirement for that matter. That's why it's important to consider your benefits in relation to all of your retirement income sources, including traditional pensions, if you're one of the lucky ones who still has one of those, IRAs, 401ks, and other investments. When seen in this context, Social Security can actually serve as the foundation of a sound retirement strategy because it is, as the name implies, a secure source of income that you can count on for life. The trick is to allocate your other assets in such a way that essentially makes them the same thing, secure sources of income. The other goal, of course, is to maximize the amount that you get from Social Security, and that starts with knowing exactly when to start taking your benefits. The difference between the best method and the second best method of collecting Social Security could mean an extra $100,000 or more in benefits over the course of your lifetime. A good first step toward making this important decision is to calculate roughly how much you can expect to receive, which is based on two primary factors: your lifetime annual earnings and your age. Now, be aware that the decision of when to apply for benefits isn't as easy as it might seem. It depends upon, yes, a wide range of factors unique to your situation: health status, life expectancy, income needs, whether you plan to continue working, your other assets, and so much more. The best way to get the right answer is to discuss this matter with a qualified financial advisor who specializes in retirement income and who understands Social Security. The advisor can help you figure out not just the best time to apply, but how to maximize your Social Security benefits in every way possible, and how to properly coordinate them with your other sources of retirement income.
The road to retirement is filled with twists and turns, and life's unexpected detours could easily throw you off course. That's why it's essential to work with a financial advisor who is also a fiduciary experienced in helping clients navigate the complexities of retirement planning while helping you pay yourself first. The road to retirement now made simple. To learn more, visit theretirementincomestore.com.
Now let's bring back in mortgage and investing expert, best-selling author, Chris Hogan. Chris, thanks again for sticking around.
Thank you, sir.
So, why else do you think it is that some people just assume they're going to have to work forever? Now, of course, some people really do. Some people know they've saved virtually nothing. They're going to have to work forever. They can't live off Social Security alone. But how about those that actually have accumulated some money? And without thinking about what retirement means to them or doesn't mean, they make that assumption. What are some of the other reasons that you find that they just feel like it's hopeless?
I found that as I talk to people, they don't often have a lot of people within their close circle that have retired well. And what I mean by that is someone that has planned and been very intentional as they move toward it. And so oftentimes we're left to our own devices, and you don't really think that it's even possible. And I think this boils down to what you and I know is people need to grow their financial IQ, understanding the terms, understanding the tools that are out there to help you build your future. If you don't know how the tools work, then you can never maximize them. And again, I'm encouraging people through my show, The Chris Hogan Show. I want people to not only understand their dreams, I want them to chase them down and live them. Like, I think it's something that we have to have this hunger and desire to make happen for ourselves. So we need to grow in our knowledge. We need to get with professionals that have knowledge that we don't have, and we need to control our habits. Our habits are the number one determining factor on what we do and what we don't do. And I think we have the potential to do whatever we dream of.
Doing a dry run, for example. I think we may have spoken about this before. Doing a retirement dry run, saying for a year or so beforehand, I'm going to live off a fixed budget, and I'm going to see what that looks like. I'm going to see what that feels like. Maybe I'll save up some vacation time. Maybe I'll take an entire month off and I'll live as a retiree. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I in previous shows have actually had that discussion.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I love that you brought up the word budgeting. Budgeting is the number one tool that will help you get to retirement, but it's also a tool that's necessary for you to stay there. David, you and I both know people that have retired and had to unretire because they did it too prematurely or they didn't do it well. So us being in control of our spending is going to be really important. Think about it right now. When do people tend to spend the most? Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's when we have the most downtime. Well, if you think about retirement, retirement is the ultimate downtime. You've got time to do the things you want. So we have to flex the muscle of control and being able to stay within some financial constraints.
Yeah, and in retirement, it's as if every day is a Saturday or Sunday. That's the reality. Now, how about, switching gears for a minute, how about the other side? We talked about those that are afraid to even think about retirement, thinking it's just not possible for them. But how about those that are overconfident in their ability to retire? And they take a look at their money, they make some interest rate assumption, which may or may not pan out. They assume that between now and age 85 or now and age 90, they'll have enough cash flow. Not really worrying about what's going to happen after age 90 because, gosh, in their mind, it's so far away. What do you tell those folks?
Well, I think it's important to sit down and talk to an investment professional to really talk and understand where you are. It's terribly dangerous to assume. We all know that. But sitting down and talking to someone and walking through it and really looking at it and understanding it is vital. We do it all the time for our cars. Right? If there's an issue, we don't know what it is, we take it to a mechanic. We do it with our health. If there's something going on that we don't understand, we eventually go see a general practitioner or a specialist, where our money is just as important. And so as you look at your 401k or 403b statement and you're thinking, man, am I on track or am I doing what I should be? The best place to go is to find an investment professional. Now, I tell people this, David, you want to find somebody and work with someone that has the heart of a teacher. That means there's somebody they're trying to help you understand, to help you to reach your dreams. They're not just trying to sell you some stuff.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. I always say education's first, and that's my personal passion when it comes to educating people financially and other areas of my life. So I'm with you 100% on that. We need to take a quick commercial break again. And when we come back, we're going to ask Chris about mortgages. You know, should you pay off your mortgage before you retire? Should you carry it through retirement? Do you need the tax deduction? Let's get the straight answers right from Chris Hogan as soon as we return. We'll be back in a minute right here on The Income Generation.
Would you take your grandchildren out for ice cream and try to pay for it using your stock certificates? No, that would be ridiculous. Instead, you would use your income. So why then do so many retirees make one of the biggest financial mistakes, dipping into their savings instead of relying on income during retirement? The good news? It's completely avoidable. To learn more, visit theretirementincomeStore.com.
Now that can be a scary sound. Naturally, we all want to look forward to a long and healthy retirement. But let's face it, the older we get, the greater our chance of having to deal with a major medical event. Aside from that, we know our routine healthcare needs are likely to increase as we get older. More doctor's visits, more medical procedures, more prescriptions. That's true even if we're doing our very best to stay healthy today. Now this raises another question, one of the scariest questions about retirement. Will I be able to cover all my medical and healthcare expenses? While most people factor healthcare costs into their plan, they often greatly underestimate their true impact. In fact, the expense of a major health event can be one of the most common causes of financial problems for retirees, including those with excellent health insurance. A serious health issue can result in hundreds of thousands of dollars in bills for hospital stays, medical procedures, and prescription drugs. Now, complicating the matter further is the fact that, as I've stressed many times on this show, medical and healthcare costs increase at a much greater rate than the general rate of inflation. In the last 18 years, inflation has grown at an average annual rate of 2.2%, while healthcare inflation has been running at 5%, more than double. And here's another way to think about that. If, for example, the current cost of a full-time in-home health care specialist is $150,000 to $200,000 a year, that means in 20 to 30 years, it may have risen to somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000 per year for that full-time home health care specialist. Even with good insurance and large savings, those kinds of costs can be devastating if you haven't properly prepared for them. For example, let's say you have $2 million in an IRA today. So with that, you determine at $150,000 a year, you can afford to have in-home nurses take care of you full-time for more than a decade. But here's the problem. If your investment allocation in that IRA is not optimal for generating income, then you won't really have that full $2 million. Because remember, at age 70 and a half, the government's going to force you to start taking these things called required minimum distributions, RMDs. If your money's allocated in such a way that you're satisfying your RMDs by taking systematic withdrawals from a mutual fund, or in any way taking principal. In other words, if they're not being satisfied completely through interest and dividends, then there's a good chance that by the time you need home health care in your 80s or 90s, that $2 million IRA might be down to only $500,000 or $600,000. Now, once you factor in healthcare inflation, those 10 years of care that you could have afforded today are suddenly down to 1 or 2 years by the time you actually need it. So that's another example of why the sum of your savings is only one small factor in retirement planning, and how even a large nest egg can be depleted if you don't have the right allocation. As I've shared before on the show, I recently saw firsthand the danger in underestimating the rising cost of healthcare when I served as a power of attorney for my aunt and uncle. They lived into their 90s. Like a lot of people, their number one goal was to be able to stay in the comfort of their home in their later years, no matter what. And they had a decent amount of assets and were able to afford full-time in-home health care for many years. Little did they know, however, that by the time they both passed, they were only about 6 months away from running out of money, after which they would have probably ended up getting forced by the Medicaid system in their state to go into a nursing home. Now, most of us probably share that goal of avoiding a nursing home if possible, and of being able to afford in-home health care if we should ever need it. That's just one factor that makes properly addressing healthcare expenses one of the most important aspects of retirement planning. Yes, it can be a scary subject, but facing it with the help of a qualified financial advisor who specializes in retirement income is a great way to begin tackling that fear. Now it's time to bring back for one last segment best-selling author, investing, and yes, mortgage expert, Chris Hogan. Chris, thanks for sticking around for so long today.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, you've heard this too, people saying, well, I want to carry my mortgage into retirement because I need a tax deduction. Frankly, that's all I have for a tax deduction. Other people have just gotten so accustomed to the payment, they think they're going to have mortgage payment forever. Yet others feel as though, I want to go into retirement completely debt-free. Talk to us about that.
Well, there are many schools of thought, David, and you've hit all of them right on the nail on the head. But I'd encourage people to think of it this way. Interest that you pay is a penalty, right? If I'm paying using someone else's money, they charge me a penalty in the form of interest. And debt brings risk. It brings an obligation. You have to make a payment. Debt doesn't care if you're sick. It doesn't care if you lose a job or if your child is sick. It's just a taker. So I encourage people, if we're trying to move forward and live our dreams, do the things we want to do on our own time frames, I want you to be free of debt and obligation. So I would say definitely pay off the home. The mindset of keeping the mortgage simply for the tax deduction this is an old school myth that drives me bonkers. Because you can do charitable giving and get the same tax deduction without the risk or debt or threat of a mortgage as you could holding on to it. And let's be honest, you only get to deduct the interest if you fully itemize your taxes, and not everyone even does that. So let's make it simple. Pay off the home, own it outright, move and live your dreams, do some giving, and you can get a tax deduction.
Well, now, and with the changes in the tax law, too, if you think about it, fewer and fewer people can itemize than ever before. So there are people that were able to actually take that mortgage deduction that, as of the last year or so, cannot. But how about that person, and I'm sure that if someone were to come to you and say, I want to plan for my retirement, I want to put away money, and I've got this great 401k plan at work, and it's solely for retirement, that's my really only remaining goal. Assuming they're in a reasonably high tax bracket when they're working, is it correct to assume that you would say, yeah, max out that 401k before you do anything else, for the most part?
Oh, I would agree with you on that. You know, the 401ks and 403bs are incredible tools. You alluded to my book, Everyday Millionaires. We did the largest study that's ever been done on millionaires, talked to over 10,000 of them. Do you know the number one tool they said helped them to reach that pinnacle of wealth? Their 401ks, employer-sponsored retirement plans, 401ks, 403bs, and IRAs. And so these are tools that we all have accessibility to. We just need to use them and understand it. And David, listen, people, and you know this, people are pulling money out right and left out of 401ks. They're telling me they're paying for weddings and home renovations. Do not do that. Your 401k and 403b is your paycheck later. Don't steal from your future trying to fund your now.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. So now let's say I take your advice. I max out the 401k. I get to retirement. I've got $1 million in my 401k. I only have $50,000 sitting in the bank. I can't pay off my mortgage. Even worse, I want to go buy a car. I deplete a good part of that $50,000. My wife needs to buy a car. Guess what? I'm out of ammunition. It's got to come out of the 401k. So in the last, in the spirit of being debt-free with your mortgage then, in the last 45 seconds we have left, how do we balance that 401k versus non-401k so we can actually get that mortgage paid by the time we retire?
Well, I think it really boils down to being really intentional. You know, some people move into retirement and they still have the mortgage. I just want to encourage them to have the mindset of paying it off. Don't let it hang around. But again, on the front end, be prepared. I want you to have a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. And let's be prepared to cash flow and do some things. You want to be smart. You want to be careful and just be intentional. And we can never confuse a want with a need, right? Needs are things we have to have. Wants are things we'd like to have.
Always some great words of wisdom, Chris. I really appreciate you being on the show. Thanks again.
Always good to be with you. Thank you, sir.
All right, stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment with more right here on The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll be right back. Now, you don't need me to tell you that we live in scary times as far as the financial markets are concerned. Since the turn of the century, we've seen 2 major sustained stock market collapses and lived through the nation's greatest financial crisis since the Great Depression. While the economy has steadily strengthened since the Great Recession and has enjoyed great growth in the past few years, there are still many unsettling elements beneath the surface. Naturally, the financial markets are always in flux to some degree, and that makes them the source of another scary question about retirement, and that is, could another major market crash wipe out my savings? The bad news is that yes, it potentially could. The good news is that it doesn't have to, and it shouldn't if you're following the right investment strategy for retirement. And that means a strategy that makes overprotection your number one priority. Overprotection from the risk of spending down your principal and from the risk of portfolio shrinkage due to another major drop. That is, another major sustained market drop. So how significant is that risk right now? Well, as I pointed out a number of times on the show, Since January of 2018, the stock market's been in a nervous holding pattern. Although it managed to hit a new record high as recently as last month, today it's actually about the same level it was at the beginning of 2018. In between, we've seen record levels of market volatility and some historic intraday drops. Prior to that, the stock market had been in a fairly steady growth mode for 8 years, although that's probably due in large part to the unprecedented levels of artificial stimulus pumped into the economy by the Federal Reserve. All of this, of course, came in response to the financial crisis. In fact, much of the instability and uncertainty we've been seeing the last 22 months is, I believe, fallout from the Fed's policies. I further believe that this nervous holding pattern the market's in is a sure sign that big investors have one finger on the trigger. They're ready to pull out as soon as the next major sustained correction takes hold. Now, in addition to slowing growth, a partially flat yield curve, and other warning signs, keep in mind that this next major correction is actually overdue. Overdue according to the patterns and the lessons of market history. History tells us it could be a big drop. That's scary, all right, but only if you haven't reduced your stock market risk by switching your investment focus from growth to income. That, as regular viewers know, is the key to making overprotection your top priority, as it should be once you're retired or close to retirement. It's also the key to eliminating the scary question from your retirement planning. Why? Because income-based strategies are specifically designed to protect your money and to generate reliable income regardless of market conditions. Now it's time to bring in our next guest, James Locke Jr., co-owner of Pool Locke Associates in Delaware. It's his first time on the show, but James is no stranger to the financial industry. He has more than 20 years of experience. He previously held a seat on the Philadelphia Stock Exchange for 7 years, where he was an independent option trading specialist. James, welcome to the Income Generation.
Thanks for having me today, Dave.
So, okay. We talk about, a lot of people talk about it's a number. You need a certain number when you retire, and the number could differ based upon who you are. But as we talk about in my new book, The Retirement Income Story, it's really not just how much money you have, but it's really more so, isn't it, about how much income that lump sum can generate during retirement?
Yeah, I mean, when you move into retirement, it's no longer about saving and trying to focus on, bumping your number up. Now you're retiring, you're trying to live, and that retirement that you've built up, it now needs to pay you, right? So it's all about what you can get out of that nest egg that you've been saving, over your working years. And your number may be different than my number, is different than the next person's number. And you need to sit down and focus on, what's going to work for you and have a game plan for your retirement moving forward.
It's funny because some people, talk about their withdrawal rate, how much they can withdraw per year as a percentage of the lump sum every year and have a reasonable chance of not running out of money. You and I like to talk a lot about income, generating enough interest and dividends, investing for the I, not the G. So in the 1 minute we have left in this block, tell our viewers why the withdrawal method is so incredibly dangerous when you're retiring.
Yeah, I mean, if you just cover your eyes and blindly say, I'm going to take out whatever the number is, 4%, 3%, whatever your number is, and you don't look and you don't pay attention to what the total is in your account, you can sit there and over 10 years, the next thing you know, your $500,000 all of a sudden may be $300,000. And then, God forbid, there's a market collapse or something like that. If you're invested in mutual funds and things like that, your money could be gone. But if you're focused on income, you have a renewable resource coming in every year. You kind of have that, that ability to spend that interest every year because it's going to be there again next year. And then in the future, if you do need that money, it's going to be there.
Yeah, renewable resource. We talk about that all the time. James, don't go away. We'll be back here in just a minute. You stay with us too. We'll be back here in a minute with some words of wisdom from our good friend, James Locke. Now let's welcome back James Locke, co-owner of Pool Locke Associates in Delaware. James, you're absolutely correct. Renewable resource, you mentioned before the break. But a lot of people today who follow that new Morningstar study that says if you're using the withdrawal method, you can only get 2.6, 2.7% of your asset base per year with a reasonable chance of not running out of money during your lifetime. But you know as well as I do that if they use the income method, they might be able to get 50% more or even double that. They can actually end up with more income and be a lot more secure, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. In fact, when people come into us, for the first time and they sit down and they're concerned, am I going to have enough money for retirement? And we kind of go through an idea of what they're trying to do, what they're trying to spend, what their income is now. And we say, hey, did you know that you could actually get more money and reduce your risk at the same time? And sometimes they look at me with a blank stare. They can't believe it. And when we walk through the process, they say, the light bulb goes off and say, oh my gosh, why hasn't anyone taught me or showed me about this income before?
So why do you think reducing your risk might be timely? Not just because someone's approaching retirement and they need to kick it down a notch, but today, where we are with the markets today in October of 2019, why do you think risk reduction is something important for people to be aware of in general?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, no one knows what's going on with the markets anymore. It's really hard to predict. The Fed's doing all kinds of things with interest rates. We're going down. We're going back down now even further. Gosh, they have negative interest rates in Europe. Who knows when the United States may get there? Politics aside, the White House affects the markets on a daily basis. And if you're in retirement, do you really want to sit there and cross your fingers and hope, like, gosh, I hope the stock market works out for me today so I can visit my children or I can take that trip? And that just doesn't make any sense. Getting out of risk and into income is the way that you know that your future is going to be secure.
And besides, we talk about this all the time, and I know you know the answer. Every long-term bear market we've ever had, like the one that started in the year 2000, has had 3 or more major drops within it. How many have we had so far in this bear market since the turn of the century?
2. There's only been 2, Dave. And listen, everyone wants the stock market to go up because it feels good and you like it, and we're optimists inherently. But there've only been 2. History tells us another drop is coming. So you know what? Just by looking at history, the S&P going down 30-40% is in play. And if you need money today, if you don't have time to wait it out, like the 13 years you had to wait from 2000 to 2013 to get back to even,
you can get caught. You can get caught in the trough. You get caught in the trough, and if you're retired, you don't want to be in the trough.
You don't have that time anymore.
Unfortunately, we need to leave it there, James. We're out of time. Thanks so much for being here on The Income Generation. I look forward to having you back. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us today for another episode of The Income Generation. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you, our new and returning viewers. Like I said, at this time of year, fear can be a lot of fun. However, as we discussed on today's show, real fears are no laughing matter. And sometimes the best way to deal with them is to confront them head on. And that's definitely true when it comes to scary questions about your retirement. For some people, one of the scariest questions is simply, can I retire? Scary because they automatically assume that they don't have enough savings to meet their income needs. But as we discussed, those people are simply approaching the question with the wrong mindset. There's much more to it than how much we've saved, because the question also relates to your goals and having the right financial strategy to generate income to meet those goals. It also relates to other sources of retirement income, including Social Security. Again, another scary topic for some people because they fear that the system might be in jeopardy or that they won't know how to maximize their own benefits. We've learned that this is another fear you can easily overcome by facing it head on with the help of the right financial advisor. The notion of a heart attack or other major medical emergency is scary for almost everyone, but that fear increases as you approach retirement for several reasons. One, as you get older, the odds of a major medical event do increase. Another, of course, is cost, and the overall prospect of having enough money to meet your medical and healthcare needs throughout retirement. That question gets even scarier when you factor in the rapid pace of healthcare inflation. And finally, in today's unprecedented age of economic uncertainty, many people fear the possibility of another major stock market crash, another major economic downturn, like those we've experienced twice so far since the turn of the century. What might that do to your retirement savings and to your retirement goals as a result? That is a legitimately scary question as well, but it doesn't have to be. You can greatly reduce and even eliminate that fear. How? By working with the right advisor to shift your financial focus from growth to retirement income. That's the key to making overprotection your number one priority and to addressing not only the scary prospect of another market crash, but all the other scary questions that we've examined right here on today's show. Happy Halloween, and thanks for watching. If you're close to retirement and you really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, as you know, it's absolutely essential that you stay informed and up to date, and right here is where you can do it on the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week.